It's day 73. It's also July 17th, 2019. And we are in Oregon's John Day River Basin. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name is Craig, and this is my story. A story about life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Hey there, and welcome back. So, where were we? Oh yeah, continuing our trek from Hardman through Unity and into John Day, Oregon. Population around 1,500. The scenery, both into and out of John Day, would be filled with two-lane highways coming down out of and then back into the mountains of eastern Oregon. The landscape switching from cattle ranches to BLM land to miles of farms, raising everything from hay, potatoes, onions, beets, even mint. The area is often referred to as Treasure Valley because of the intensive bounty of the land, in particular along the Idaho border. After gassing up in John Day, we pondered spending the afternoon and evening in an RV park, several to choose from, but having just done that at Willow Creek, I really felt like a little more alone time. Just soaking up the scenery would be better. Something was telling me that if we just trekked out into the John Day River Basin, we'd find the perfect spot. And we did. We would spend the night pulled off into a scenic vista lookout in the middle of the basin. The natural beauty, the breathtaking scenery, combined with the intense geological history of the area makes it hard to stop staring. Amazing sunsets and sunrises, well, they only make it better. We spent an evening wandering around the scenic vista and snapping photos, reading even more historical markers that speak to the history and the hardship of the folks that had trekked through this place all those years ago. And all this, combined with the overwhelming sense of the millions of years it must have taken for this place to happen, to look like this. I was really itching to get online and start learning, but for this night, it would be just the boys and I, minus the internet. The other thing I started to notice here is that time, at least according to a clock, starts to fade away. Things become more about when the sun comes up and when it goes down. I took photos well into dusk while conjuring up images in my head about who had passed here before me, what they might have seen, and what they hoped to find just another few days up the trail. They didn't mark things by miles trekked or minutes ticking by on a clock. They certainly didn't have a cell phone telling them what was just up the road. What they had instead? An intense vision conjured up in their head about this prosperous place called Oregon. Word of mouth and a dream had convinced them that what lay ahead was the perfect place to settle, live, work hard, and prosper. But was it a day away? Was it a month away? They would know when they got there. I went to sleep that night pondering what it must have been like to go through everything they went through on a daily basis, only to go to sleep knowing that they'd get up and do it all over again. Up at sunrise the next day, fired up a pot of coffee. After breakfast and a walk, we plopped down in a folding chair in front of the RV to enjoy the scenery as I tapped away on the laptop writing this. It was also funny to me that I was noticing for the first time, or maybe just paying attention and pondering on this particular morning, that regardless of where we park and where I have them tethered on their retractable leashes, the boys always seem to be at the end of their retractable leash. There's never enough leash for them. I started wondering what it might be like in their heads, what it might be like to live life constantly pulling on the leash. Enough life is never enough. Always pulling and pushing to go further, in a never-ending quest to ignore the thing that holds you back. I guess maybe if something's holding you back, just keep pulling. Never give up. Seems to be working for these two. I was finishing up a second cup of coffee when a pickup truck rolled up the road, pulling up to a fence line across the highway. A couple of ranchers got out, hats on in preparation for the rising sun, and began relocating fencing materials from the back of the pickup to the stretch of fence they would spend the next hour or so mending. As I watched them work, I kept shifting between random thoughts in my head. First, remembering my time with my grandfather repairing fences on the cattle ranch in Gilroy. It was hot. It was sweaty. It wasn't fun. And the whole time, thinking about 1,000 other places I'd rather be. But yet at the same time, how determined he was to get the job done. Job has to be done, so do it, he would say. And then, watching these two, clearly, this is their life, their land, their dreams, no doubt their livelihood. So, there's a job to be done, they do it. So why does sitting here today watching them do this at the break of dawn in the middle of Oregon look so attractive? I'm not thinking about the thousands of places I'd rather be, but instead, I'm somehow wishing that I was doing what they're doing. The very same thing I'd spent so much time wishing I wasn't doing all those years ago. I also suddenly realized that it made no difference to them whether or not the cell phone rang, or pinged with a text message, email, or some random social media notification. What mattered was that a fence was down and they needed to fix it. I don't know, man. Hard to articulate the crazy ramblings in this human brain, but maybe sometimes we should just go fix a fence. So anyway, with a town, a river, a national monument, and even an entire basin named after him, who's John Day? Well, at a time before the country had fought for and won its independence from Britain, John Day would begin life in Culpeper County, Virginia. References would indicate that he was an adventurous sort at a very young age, and would find his fair share of indiscretions and trouble early on in life. Pinpointing exact dates and ages are difficult, but it's clear that his quest to move west would begin early as he found his way through Kentucky and can be traced to Missouri by the time he'd hit his 20s. Along the way, he'd try his hand at multiple trades. He'd try farming for a time, and at one point he had even established a salt pepper mining operation. But in the end, it would be his passion for hunting and trapping that he would excel at, and become known for across the region. It's estimated that around 1810, John would cross paths with some other adventurers around Missouri and become a part of the Pacific Fur Company, led by Jacob Astor. You may remember Jacob Astor from my episode about Astoria, Oregon, the town in which Astor would establish the first fur trading company in the Pacific Northwest and the first settlement in Oregon, which would be named for him. John Day's reputation had preceded him, making his hunting and trapping skills a perfect fit for the expedition west. It also fit nearly perfectly with his thirst for adventure and exploration. It was interesting to learn that while a part of this expedition, he would trek all over Oregon, Washington, and even Idaho, but never actually spent any time in the area that so predominantly carries his name. So how did that come to be? Legend has it that during the expedition west, the party had become too large to manage, so it was decided that John Day and Ramsey Crooks would split off and take a different path with a plan to meet up in the spring at the mouth of the Columbia River. The winter of 1811 and into 1812 would test the two beyond imagination. The rugged terrain would present every imaginable obstacle through the harsh winter, dealing with threats from wildlife, weather, navigating their way through the rocky cliffs and deep gorges, attempted crossings of the then undammed and untamed rivers would threaten their lives on what seemed like a daily basis. Things would turn even uglier for the two when they had finally reached and were ascending the Columbia River in the spring of 1812, where they would be attacked, robbed, stripped of all their clothing, and left to die by hostile natives in the area. The attack would force the two to backtrack some 80 miles to the friendlier territories of the Umatilla tribes. So once again, they would have to navigate the harsh terrain that had nearly killed them the first time, this time without supplies or even clothes. Sheer determination would somehow get them through to where they would be met by friendly natives who would provide them shelter, nurturing them back to health and helping them restock their supplies. Word of the attack must have somehow reached the remainder of the Astor party, as they would shortly thereafter rescue the two, and the party would reach Fort Astoria later that month. And even though he had not fully recovered from his ordeal, John Day would be sent on another assignment just 2 months later in June. This time, he would be sent back to Missouri as a member of the Robert Stewart party. But not long into the journey, Stewart would become concerned with Day's behavior, calling it strange and even suicidal. Fearing for everyone's safety, Stewart would pay a native to take Day back to Astoria. But upon his arrival in Astoria, Day appeared in good health, exhibiting no signs of derangement. In 1813, Fort Astoria and its assets would be sold to the Northwest Company, and John Day would spend the next 8 years hunting and trapping for the new company. His expeditions through this period took him mainly into the Willamette Valley and interior Northwest. In 1820, John Day was at the winter camp of Donald Mackenzie in Butte County, Idaho. There are a lot of stories out there around exactly what happened, but one of the more predominant tellings centers around the fact that Day had begun once again exhibiting signs of what was then called madness. Ultimately, and sadly, he would wander off into the woods, and the harsh winter would claim his life on February 16, 1820. He was buried in the area, and a marker carries his name to this day. It would be the retellings of this harrowing journey through the area and surviving it that would lift the name to legendary status amongst the pioneer community. As mapping and naming of the area began, the area around the original attack, which was then called the Mau Mau River, would be renamed the John Day River. Through the years, his name would show up all across the region as a reminder and a monument to the extremes endured by so many during their travels into the Pacific Northwest. And as for Ramsey Crooks, who survived the attack along with John Day, he would later go on to become the general manager of the American Fur Trade Company and serve as its president from 1834 to 39. Along the way, he would marry twice, having a total of 10 children. He ultimately ended up living in New York until his death in 1859. While his name does not show up across eastern Oregon, his contributions to the exploration and development of the area are as important as anyone's of the time. The first homestead staked in John Day was in 1862, the same year that nearby Canyon City was platted. And not long after, gold would be discovered in an area called Whiskey Gulch, leading to rapid growth for Canyon City. The placer mines, as they would become known, in the Canyon District are considered to be the richest ever mined in Oregon. Although accurate records were not kept in the 1860s, it is estimated that during the first few years as much as $5 million in gold was produced from these mines. At the peak of the Canyon District rush, it is claimed that 10,000 people lived in Canyon City, making it larger than Portland at the time. Prosperity, however, would not be kind to Canyon City in many ways, As the gold rush intensified, so did outlaw activity in the area, ranging from bank and merchant robberies to stagecoach robberies into and out of the bustling mining community. In addition, claim-jumping activity would rise, as would bloody conflicts with the local Native Americans, and this would continue until nearly the turn of the century. And as if all this were not enough, in America's truly Wild West, fires would devastate the town on 3 separate occasions, which eventually led to folks migrating 2 miles up the road to John Day, where the local community and economy had remained more focused on farming, ranching, and timber. Today, the population of Canyon City hovers at around 600, while neighboring John Day would eventually reach 1,600, where it remains today. Also interestingly, the largest part of John Day's earliest community would be composed of Chinese immigrants drawn to the area during the gold rush, and for many years, this area of John Day would be affectionately referred to as Tiger Town, a nickname familiar to the area through modern day. John Day would go on to become incorporated in 1901. The area would continue to thrive in agriculture and timber while retaining its small-town personality. This would continue well into the 1990s, when a downturn in the timber industry would hit the town's economy pretty hard, leading to the closure of mills and merchants all throughout the town. But fortunately for John Day, local leaders at the time would adopt a forward-thinking strategy for the area in an effort to create a more sustainable next chapter for the town. They would embark on an ambitious plan which included a 5-year community investment strategy, and the strategy included community amenities like developing and growing an integrated park system, collaboration for a new Grant County Library facility, programs to foster entrepreneurship and small business, promoting the area's abundance of outdoor activities ranging from hiking and biking through the rugged terrain to canoeing and rafting adventures on the river, even skiing during the winter months, and even plans for a state-of-the-art aquatic center. And an incredibly forward-thinking strategy within all of this was to focus investment in vocational training in their local schools. This was an effort that would connect local youth with sustaining and rewarding jobs in the area, centered around the incredible history of the Basin in general, what can be learned from it, and how it continues to drive the area's economy. Pretty cool stuff, John Day. So what about the river basin itself? Well, first, it's actually within the 14,000-acre John Day Fossil Beds National Monument. The National Monument is divided into 3 separate units: Sheeprock, Painted Hills, and Clarno. All 3 units showcase colorful rock formations that preserve a world-class record of plant and animal evolution, changing climate, and past ecosystems spanning over some 40 to 60 million years. Collaborations between several groups in the area have provided scenic drives, hiking trails, and even the Thomas Condon Visitor Center, which takes a deep dive through exhibition and video into the area's past and how it became what it is today. Point being, there's so much to learn here about the area's past and the formation of the northwestern portion of the continent, and you have several ways to explore and learn it. The river basin itself spans an area of around 10,000 acres and is drained by the John Day River and its tributaries. The backdrop for the entire area is Oregon's high desert scenery, an area of rugged mountainous terrain, steep river canyons, and rich wildlife habitat. The area has been formed by volcanic activity with rock masses composed of numerous volcanic flows that alternate from ash, tuffus, sands, and gravels. And what's tuffus? I had to look that up. Basically, it's a type of limestone. It's all pretty incredible that the science of geology and the study of it has enabled us to learn things like this place we now call Oregon. Well, it spent the first 30-some million years of its known existence underwater. The fossil formations that have been discovered and these rock formations that we look at today began underwater, submerged in what would become the Pacific Ocean. Glacial activity to the north, combined with extreme volcanic activity throughout the area, would eventually shove these formations to elevations of nearly 9,000 feet above sea level. And within a few million years of that, the area would develop into a lush, tropical-like area. Panama was used as one reference, complete with avocados, bananas, palmettos, with lush layers of tropical plants, some 700-plus species documented through the fossil discovery. Relatives of animals that we know as crocodiles, rhinos, horses, even elephants and giraffes, lots of other bizarre species that humans would never see, called this area home. Many of the species that have been found in fossil formations have been found nowhere else on the planet, making this region of Oregon a very unique ecosystem, not only today, but apparently throughout millions of years of evolution. And within a few million years of this, and some 30 million years ago today, continued volcanic activity through the area would begin to wipe out existing landscape and replace it all with a temperate hardwood forest, with many more subtle iterations in between. The area at this point in time, and up through about the last 5 to 7 million years, would begin to shift more rapidly, relatively speaking, making it a very dangerous place to be for the animals of the time. Lava flows throughout the area actually created scenarios in which a rhino-like creature could be bathing in a lake one moment and then be instantly consumed, roasted, and fossilized by a lava flow. Over the last 6 or so million years, things would calm down, leaving us with what we see today, and all that it has to teach us. Also interesting to learn of the biological importance that the area holds across the country, and for the world for that matter. It is home to several protected species, and in addition, the Blue Mountain bioregion, which the John Day River cuts through, is considered one of the most important habitat connectivity corridors in the world, because it provides a corridor of public land that spans from the Rocky Mountains to the Cascades that countless wildlife species count on. And, just a quick reference for anyone out there interested in more detail around the area's development, I found a YouTube channel named Oregon Wild, and in particular I watched an episode titled Layers of Life. These folks are going on 5 decades of digging into topics just like this one, but all across the state of Oregon. Their key mission is protecting Oregon's wildlife, and it's pretty cool stuff. As I packed things up, preparing to head out, I kept staring into the vastness of this place, marrying it in my mind with what I had read about what it once was and how it evolved over time. But most of all, how insignificant my passage through here is in the grand scheme of time. I also reflected back to a quote I once heard. I think it was Mel Robbins said once during a TED Talk. Well, she said a couple of things. First, she said that we live at an amazing point in time. The discoveries made and the information that we have access to, literally at our fingertips, is unparalleled in history and gets deeper every day. She also quoted an interesting statistical fact that struck me for a couple of different reasons. First, the fact that scientists have actually crunched the numbers and calculated the odds of me being born when I was, where I was, to my parents, with my DNA. And those odds, 1 in 400 trillion. That I would be this person, born in these circumstances, at this particular point in time. I was not born in a place or time when I could be eaten by a prehistoric animal just by walking outside. I was not born in a place or time where I could be jailed or killed for speaking out against a king or a dictator or a government. I wasn't born in a time or place where I had to walk with a mule for miles to go grocery shopping or hunting. Instead, against the odds of 1 in 400 trillion, I was born in a place and time in which I have access to everything I have access to in our world today, and I have the opportunity to sit in a place like this in Eastern Oregon and not only wonder or fantasize about what it must have once looked like or become what it is today, but I can go to a thing called YouTube and watch it happen before my eyes. So I guess with odds like that working in my favor, it'd be kind of dumb not to keep going, not to keep exploring, not to keep wondering. We pulled out of the scenic vista and headed east towards the Idaho border and beyond. I wonder what we'll learn there. Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.